The CEO's husband brought me breakfast that morning. An hour later, a blood-curdling scream tore through the office, and when I saw what lay on the floor, my legs gave out. I didn't know it yet, but that scream was the start of a chain reaction I would never forget. That morning, I arrived early, as I always did, before the building came alive with the buzz of hurried footsteps and ringing phones. The elevator chimed softly as I stepped out, the polished floors reflecting the faint golden sunlight that crept through the windows. My office smelled faintly of polished wood and coffee, a comforting scent that usually calmed me before the chaos began. I had barely set down my bag when a familiar chill ran through me, my hand instinctively going to my stomach. Morning sickness had been my cruel companion these past months. 3 months pregnant, and every new smell, every sudden movement, felt amplified, magnified, like my body was waging war against itself. I breathed through it, counting slowly, the quiet mantra I repeated every morning. In, out, endure. Then the door swung open. Travante, my husband, the man whose presence had once felt like safety, like home, now radiated a tension I couldn't read. But today, he smiled. Not the corporate, polished smile, but one soft and almost intimate, the kind that hinted at the man I had once loved. And in his hands, a pale blue thermal container. Expensive, heavy, deliberate. "Good morning, baby," he said, setting it carefully on my desk. "Happy anniversary. I wanted to do something special for you today." I froze. 3 years. 3 long years of marriage, of silent dinners, of patience, of sacrifices, of walking on eggshells around a man who had slowly changed from husband to enigma. I forced a smile, even as the familiar wave of nausea rose. He opened the container, and steam curled into the air, carrying a pungent, overwhelming scent that made my stomach twist violently. Chitlins, his special, slow-cooked chitterlings, the smell of which always made me gag lately. My heart sank. If I hadn't been careful, if I had let my emotions fool me, I might have taken a bite. "I got up before dawn to make this for you," he said, oblivious to the reaction his gift had triggered. "I know you've been tired. I thought this might help." I swallowed hard, forcing calm into my voice. "Thank you, but I had breakfast at home. I'm full." His smile faltered for a fraction of a second. Then, almost too easily, he recovered. "Just a little won't hurt. It's still warm. Eat it for me." There was something in his eyes then, something I couldn't quite place. It wasn't love, not entirely. It was expectation, calculation, a subtle pressure beneath the softness of his words. My fingers brushed the lid instinctively, but I did not open it again. I knew I couldn't. And then, as if the universe had sensed my panic, the knock came. Kishia, our new secretary, stepped in, carrying a stack of documents. Her presence was like sunlight cutting through shadows, confident, seductive, alive. She glanced at the container, and then at me, her smile sugary. "Oh, how thoughtful of the director," she said sweetly, her eyes flicking to Travante. "Lucky you, Zanaya. A husband who cooks. Not everyone has that." Travante didn't even look at her. He gave me a final instruction and left the office, leaving a silence that was heavy, almost oppressive. My mind raced. The smell of the chitlins seemed to grow stronger, filling the room. A dangerous temptation I could not allow myself to indulge. And then an idea struck me. A lifeline. I smiled gently, pushing the container toward Kichya. "You hungry?" I asked. "Eat it for me. It's still warm." Her eyes lit up like she'd been handed treasure. "Oh, thank you," she cooed, scooping up the container with gleeful abandon. Relief flooded me. My stomach had been spared, my secret safe, for now. I sat back in my chair, trying to steady my shaking hands. The office came alive slowly as employees trickled in, the day beginning in its usual chaotic rhythm. But beneath it all, a storm was brewing, one that I couldn't yet see, but that would soon roar in a way that would change everything. I took a deep sip of lukewarm water, rubbing my hands over my belly, feeling the tiny movements of life inside me. A reminder, a fragile, precious reminder of what was at stake. And yet, even as I tried to focus on my reports, an uneasy sense of foreboding pressed against my chest, heavy as the storm clouds gathering outside the windows. 1 hour, I thought, 1 hour, and everything will change. If I had eaten that breakfast, if I hadn't given it to her, the scream that would shake my world might have been mine. The scream ripped through the office like a physical blow. It wasn't just loud. It was a sound that pierced every corner, sinking into my chest, shattering calm, twisting my blood cold. My heart leapt into my throat, and for a second the world tilted sideways, as if gravity itself had betrayed me. I froze, unable to move, even though every instinct screamed at me to run. My hands shook, my stomach knotted, not from nausea, but from a premonition I couldn't explain. That scream didn't sound like panic. It sounded like something more primal. Pain, betrayal, and terror wrapped together into a single piercing note that demanded attention. Then my legs finally obeyed. I bolted from my office, nearly tripping over the edge of the chair. The hallway was empty except for scattered papers fluttering like frightened birds. Every step echoed in the silence, amplifying the dread that had already taken root in my chest. And then I saw her, Kesia. She was on the floor, writhing in agony next to my husband's thermal container, which lay overturned, its contents spilling across the carpet in a sickly, pungent mess. The smell hit me instantly, a vile mixture of stewed chitlins and something far more sinister. My stomach heaved in reflex, but I forced myself to stay rooted, to breathe through the rising panic. Her hands clutched her stomach, trembling violently. Her face, once perfectly made up, was now pale and twisted in pain. Her lips quivered, her eyes rolled back, and foam gathered at the corners of her mouth. The beige pencil dress she had worn that morning was stained dark at the hem, spreading like ink across the pristine office carpet. I felt my knees buckle, and I caught myself on the nearest desk. My pulse thundered in my ears as the room seemed to tilt, each second stretching into an eternity. Employees ran in every direction, screaming, dialing phones, shouting 911 over the cacophony. And then I felt it. A horrifying clarity. The container, the food, the stew I had given her. My hands trembled as I realized, if I hadn't been careful, if I hadn't given it to her. Travante's office door slammed open with a force that shook the frame. He ran out, his usual composed expression replaced with something I had never seen before. Panic. Pure, unfiltered, almost animalistic panic. But instead of rushing to help Keisha, his gaze shot to me. And in that look, there was nothing of concern for his wife. No care. No fear for the child I carried. Only something cold, calculating, almost predatory. "What did you do?" His voice was low, trembled with fury, his hand gripping my arm with a force that made me gasp. "Why? Why her?" I shook him off, my own voice icy with controlled horror. "What did I do? I didn't touch it. I gave it to her because I couldn't eat it." His eyes narrowed, searching mine as if trying to read my thoughts. For a fraction of a second, the mask slipped, and I saw it. The man I had married, now unrecognizable, a stranger wearing the skin of someone I once loved. I wanted to scream, but the sound lodged itself in my throat. All I could do was watch Keisha writhe, helpless, on the office floor, surrounded by a chaos I couldn't yet control. The fear in her eyes mirrored the terror I felt rising from deep inside me. And for a moment, I realized just how fragile life could be, and how cruelly fate could twist the yet choices we make. Paramedics arrived moments later, a flurry of movement, orders, and antiseptic. Kitsia was lifted onto a stretcher, the container of food now irrelevant in the whirlwind of panic and red-tinged carpet. Travante followed with a sharp, shallow breath, but his eyes didn't leave me. They were still locked, still accusing, still dangerous. I stepped back, trying to keep my trembling under control, focusing instead on the tiny movements from within my belly. My child. My reason to survive. To remain vigilant. One thought anchored me. If that had been me instead of Kichia, if I had eaten that breakfast. I shuddered at the alternative I had narrowly escaped. The office descended into chaos around me, the screams blending into a dull roar in my mind. And yet, in the center of it all, I felt a strange clarity forming, a realization that the man I had trusted, the life I had believed in, had cracks far deeper than I had imagined. Everything was about to change. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that this was only the beginning. If the stew hadn't been given to her instead of me, I would have been the one screaming, and no one would have survived the truth I was about to uncover. The ambulance sirens tore through the city streets like wailing ghosts, echoing the scream that still rang in my ears. I followed closely behind, heart hammering against my ribs, my legs trembling with every step. Keisha was on a stretcher, pale and shaking, paramedics working frantically to stabilize her. I felt utterly powerless, a spectator to a nightmare I had narrowly escaped. Travante ran beside me, his expensive shoes clattering on the pavement. But I noticed something chilling. He wasn't looking at Keisha. He wasn't asking if she was alive. His eyes were scanning me, calculating, almost angry. My stomach twisted, not from nausea this time, but from the horror of realizing just how little of the man I had married still existed beneath that carefully curated facade. Inside the emergency room, the fluorescent lights cast a cold, merciless glow over the sterile tiles. Nurses and doctors moved with urgent precision, voices clipped and professional. Keisha was wheeled into a trauma bay, her face pale, lips quivering, her fingers clutching at the sheets as if they could anchor her to life. I sat frozen in the waiting area, hands clenched around the strap of my bag. Every muscle in my body screamed, but I forced myself to breathe, to focus. My baby moved lightly against my palm, a tiny, stubborn pulse of life that reminded me of why I had to stay calm, why I couldn't break down. Travante paced in front of the ER doors like a caged animal. His tailored suit, now wrinkled and disheveled, did nothing to hide the tension coiling in his shoulders, the twitch in his jaw. Yet still, he didn't approach me. His eyes flicked toward the stretcher, then back at me, a dangerous mixture of suspicion and rage simmering beneath the surface. The doctor finally emerged, mask pulled down, face serious, lined with exhaustion. Travante lunged forward immediately. "How is she? Is it serious?" His voice cracked, betraying the composure he usually commanded effortlessly. The doctor's gaze lingered on Travante longer than polite protocol would allow before settling on me. "Acute poisoning," he said slowly, each word falling like a hammer. "She's stable now, but the substance she ingested is potent. Very potent. It caused severe hemorrhage, dangerous uterine contractions, and—" His voice softened, almost mournful. "Duh. The fetus could not survive." Time froze. My breath caught. My stomach knotted again, not from sickness, but from the shock that ripped through me. I stared at Travante, who had gone pale, his hand clenching the armrest of the chair he had collapsed into. I could see the realization dawning on him, the unraveling of the plan he hadn't even consciously shared with me, his eyes wide, lips slightly trembling, unsteady. The world around me blurred and leaving only the two of us and the awful, undeniable truth. The young secretary lying in front of us had been carrying his child, and in his twisted, secret calculations, the target had been me. Police officers arrived, calm but firm, taking in the chaos and urgency. Travante's eyes darted toward me, and I realized he was already constructing an alibi, a narrative that would attempt to pin guilt on me while he distanced himself from the yacht. Horror his own plan had caused. I took a deep breath, steadying my voice, pushing fear aside. "I did nothing. I didn't touch the stew," I told the lead officer. "It was still in my office. I gave it to her because I couldn't eat it. Everything else. Look at the cameras, check the kitchen, check the thermos. Everything will show the truth." Travante's lips moved, but no sound came out at first. Then, shaking, he tried to craft his story. I made the stew myself. She had access to it. Maybe she slipped something in." His voice wavered, unconvincing, desperate. The officer's gaze was unwavering. "We will investigate everything. Security cameras, forensic tests, everything. Do not interfere." I looked at Travante, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Clarity. The man I had once loved, the person I had trusted with my heart, had revealed himself completely, not through words, but through actions, through obsession, through the deadly intentions that had been hidden behind his charming smile. And I realized something else, something terrifying yet empowering. I had survived. My baby had survived. That one instinctive choice, handing the stew to Keisha instead of eating it, had saved both our lives. The lead officer motioned for me to sit in a quieter corner. I did, hands resting lightly on my belly, feeling the small, stubborn life within me pulse with energy and resilience. I knew then that whatever came next, whatever revelations unfolded, I would face them fully awake, fully alive, and fully protective of what truly mattered. The truth was out there, hidden behind the polite masks and corporate facades, and soon it would be laid bare. The stew had done more than almost kill me. It had revealed the dark heart of the man I had married. And now, every step forward would pull us deeper into a storm I wasn't yet ready to face. The fluorescent lights of the hospital hallway reflected off the tiled floor, casting long, cold shadows. Every sound, the hurried footsteps of nurses, the muted beeping of monitors from the ER, the low murmur of officers speaking, felt amplified, reverberating in my chest like a countdown. I gripped the strap of my bag, my knuckles white, and rested a hand over my belly, feeling the tiny, stubborn movements that reminded me why I couldn't afford fear. Not now, not ever. Travante sat across from me, his posture stiff, hands clasped tight, jaw clenched. There was no charm left, no soft smile, just the raw edge of panic masquerading as control. He was already constructing the story he would tell, and yet, beneath that facade, I could see the cracks. Sweat dotted his temple. His eyes darted nervously to every movement around him. Two officers approached me, one older, calm, with eyes that seemed to weigh every detail I offered carefully. The younger one stayed close to Travante, taking notes and occasionally glancing up, skeptical but respectful. The older officer motioned for me to recount everything, and I began, my voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through my veins. I arrived at the office early that morning, I started. As usual. Travante appeared with a breakfast container, a special one he made for me. I couldn't eat it because of my morning sickness, so I gave it to Kitia. That's all. I didn't touch it, I didn't add anything, and I left it completely intact. The container was still in my office, untouched, until she came in and took it. The older officer nodded slowly, pen moving deliberately across his notebook. Continue, he said, his tone neutral but commanding attention. I described everything, the moment Travante had entered with the container, the steam curling into the air, the pungent smell that had made my stomach twist, the way I had forced a smile, and finally, how Keach had gleefully taken the stew. I recounted each word, each gesture, each detail about the timing. Every second mattered. Across the hall, Travante's voice rose, shaking as he tried to defend himself. I went to the market myself. I prepared the stew personally, from start to finish. No one else touched it. It was meant for my wife. My intentions were pure. She must have done something. She's jealous. She's unstable. His words, meant to frame me as the culprit, only tightened the noose around his own neck. Every claim he made was immediately countered by facts he couldn't escape. The container, the office cameras, the kitchen cameras at home, the witnesses who had seen him deliver. Yet the older officer's gaze remained fixed on him, unflinching. We will verify everything, he said slowly. Cameras, forensics, all evidence. Do not interfere with the investigation. I sat back in the chair, closing my eyes for a moment, letting the terror ebb slightly, replaced by clarity. For the first time, I saw the entire situation as a puzzle, and I held a crucial piece that Travante had overlooked. The timing of my refusal, the transfer of the stew, the untouched container in my office. His plan had failed before it had even begun. The younger officer whispered something to his senior colleague, casting furtive glances at Travante. I saw him stiffen, a flicker of fear crossing his face. He tried to speak, to spin another lie, but his voice faltered. Investigate thoroughly, he barked, louder than necessary. My wife. She must have slipped something in. The words were absurd, but they carried venom. I felt a surge of both fury and resolve. This was the man I had married, the man I had loved blindly, now trying to frame me for an act of murder. And yet, beneath his fury, I saw something he didn't realize I could see, his fear, the first cracks of true panic. I stood, moving closer to them, my voice calm but sharp. Travante, if you think it was me, tell me, what was my motive? To harm your secretary? Or are you afraid that the truth about you and your intentions will come to light? His face drained of color. His eyes darted nervously, avoiding mine. You don't know what you're saying, he stammered. I did. I knew everything. And in that moment, I understood something deeper. Survival wasn't just about protecting myself or my child. It was about witnessing the collapse of a man who had hidden his cruelty behind charm and wealth for far too long. The investigation had begun. The truth was about to claw its way to the surface, and there was no hiding from it, not for him, and not for me. Every lie Travante had built was unraveling, and soon, the evidence would reveal what he never expected. The real danger wasn't the stew, it was him. The waiting room was quiet now, the chaos of the ER replaced by the sterile, oppressive hum of fluorescent lights. I sat rigid in the cold plastic chair, my fingers clasped tightly over my belly. Each tiny kick reminded me of what I had narrowly protected, life that depended entirely on my vigilance. Across the hall, Travante sat slouched, his tailored suit now rumpled, his hair a mess, his usually immaculate composure shattered. He didn't dare meet my eyes, but I could feel them burning into me, sharp and accusing, trying to penetrate the calm I forced into my posture. The forensic technician finally emerged, a small envelope clutched in his hands, his expression unreadable. Travante's body tensed, as if expecting an executioner's verdict. I swallowed hard, focusing on the steady rhythm of my own breathing, preparing myself for the truth to land like a physical blow. "We analyzed the container, the stew, and the spoon," the technician began. His voice was precise, neutral, almost clinical. "Fingerprints match both Mrs. Zanaya and the victim, Keisha. That confirms the sequence of contact as described. More importantly, the substance found in the stew is consistent throughout. It was mixed into the food itself, not sprinkled on top. This indicates it was added during preparation, or immediately after, while the food was still hot and stirred thoroughly." Travante's hand twitched, and I saw the first flicker of true panic cross his features. His carefully constructed web of lies was beginning to unravel. I felt a surge of resolve. Every instinct screamed at me to stay calm, to let the truth speak louder than fear. The technician continued. "The substance is misoprostol, a drug that induces uterine contractions. In the victim's system, the concentration was extremely high, enough to cause violent hemorrhage. Unfortunately, the fetus did not survive." The words landed like a bomb. My breath caught, not for my child, but for the horrifying reality I now face. Travante had intended this for me. The young, innocent life Keisha had carried had been destroyed, unknowingly by his own hand, or at least by his meticulously crafted plan gone tragically awry. Travante's face went pale, then ashen. His hands trembled slightly, and his lips moved soundlessly, as if trying to argue against the crushing weight of evidence he couldn't escape. I rose slowly, the muscles in my legs stiff with tension, and approached him, voice controlled but icy. "Do you understand now?" I asked quietly, each word deliberate. "The plan you made, it didn't fail. It just failed to hit the right target." He flinched, the mask of composure slipping completely. "No, no, that's not possible. She must have taken it herself. She knew she was pregnant." His voice cracked, panic lacing every syllable. The officer beside me shook his head, his expression stern. "That's enough, sir. Evidence does not lie. Fingerprints, toxicology results, eyewitness accounts, they all point to the preparation of the substance and the timeline you described." Travante's entire body seemed to shrink under the weight of the truth. I watched him, a mix of pity and disgust rising in me. This was the man I had married, the man I had once trusted with my life. And now he sat exposed, stripped bare of charm, integrity, and morality. I placed a hand lightly on my belly and took a slow breath, letting the small movements of my child anchor me. I realized something profound in that moment. Survival wasn't just about avoiding physical danger. It was about seeing clearly, feeling deeply, and holding on to the truth in the face of betrayal. The young officer leaned closer to Travante. "We need you to accompany us to the station," he said firmly. "We will review all recordings, verify your statements, and clarify all contradictions. Until then, do not interfere with the investigation." Travante's eyes flickered toward me one last time, hate, fear, and desperation mingling in a glance I would never forget. But I was no longer the woman trembling under his manipulations. I had seen the storm behind his mask, and I was ready. The man who had once been my world had revealed his true face, and there was no turning back now. The evidence had spoken. Every lie, every plan, every calculated move of Travante's life was now exposed, and the next chapter would show just how far a man will go when cornered by the truth. The sterile air of the police station smelled faintly of disinfectant and tension. Every corner of the room seemed to hum with quiet authority, a sharp contrast to the chaos of the morning. Travante sat across from a younger officer, posture rigid, jaw tight, his expensive suit now an ironic mockery of the man he had tried so desperately to appear. I observed from a distance, hand over my belly, feeling the life within me, a reminder that truth and resilience could survive even the most calculated malice. Travante's eyes darted constantly, avoiding the gaze of the officers, flicking to the cameras mounted in the corners, then back to me, full of accusation and veiled menace. He had expected control. He had expected the narrative to bend to his will. Instead, the weight of evidence was pressing down on him like an unrelenting tide. "I prepared the stew myself," he began, voice firm but shaking. "I went to the market myself. I selected everything personally. I cleaned the kitchen personally. No one touched it. It was meant for my wife." The officer nodded slowly, pen in hand, recording every word, every inflection. "We will verify all of that," he said. "Your statement alone is not sufficient. Cameras, timestamps, forensic tests. Every claim you've made will be checked against physical evidence." Travante's hands clenched into fists. She must have done it. My wife. Jealous. Unstable. She wanted to ruin me. That's why." His voice cracked, panic lacing his carefully constructed sentences. I felt a surge of anger, not just for myself, but for the innocent life that had been destroyed. The audacity of his lies, the casual way he tried to deflect blame, made my blood boil. Slowly, deliberately, I approached the desk, letting my presence fill the room. My voice was calm, but the weight of it carried the power of truth. "Travante," I said, keeping my gaze steady. "Look at me. Tell me your plan. Were you hoping it would be me who suffered? Were you expecting the worst for the life I carry?" His face went white. For a brief moment, the mask slipped completely. His lips parted, but no words came out. He realized, with the faintest hint of horror, that the meticulous control he had prided himself on had completely failed. The older officer who had been observing stepped forward. "Mr. Travante, the forensic analysis clearly indicates the misoprostol was mixed thoroughly into the stew during preparation. The substance was uniform, dissolved in every piece. This is not consistent with someone adding it afterward, after the food had cooled. Do you understand the significance of this?" Travante's hands shook. His mind raced. He wanted to argue, to deflect, to bend reality back in his favor, but the weight of science, fact, and logic pressed against him. His eyes, once sharp and commanding, now darted around the room as if searching for a hidden escape. I remained silent, watching him unravel piece by piece. It was not vengeance that drove me, it was clarity. I had survived, my child had survived, and the truth, no matter how calculated he thought it had been, was unstoppable. The younger officer handed a folder to Travante. Inside were images from the security cameras, the office, the kitchen, the exact moment the container left the home and arrived at the office. Every detail matched the story I had told. My refusal, Kishi, taking the food, the timeline that exonerated me entirely. Travante's face tightened, color draining as he realized the trap of his own making was closing around him. I took a step closer. "Travante," I said softly, almost pityingly, "this isn't just about what you did to me. This is about what you tried to do to your own child. And you failed. You failed spectacularly." He swallowed hard, lips quivering, unable to meet my gaze. I knew then that the man I had once loved, the man I had trusted blindly, no longer existed. Not behind the mask, not in his eyes. The real storm was only beginning, and I was ready to face it head on. In that room, watching him crumble, I realized the depth of his deception, and that surviving him would require more than courage. It would require exposing every dark corner of the man I had once called my husband. The fluorescent light flickered slightly as I sat across from Travante, watching the man I had once loved crumble like a carefully constructed facade of porcelain. His eyes darted nervously, his hands clenching and unclenching on the table. His expensive suit wrinkled, a visual echo of the unraveling inside him. The officers observed quietly, taking notes, their pens scratching across paper like a metronome ticking down the final moments of his control. Travante opened his mouth, and then closed it, swallowed by the weight of the evidence. The camera footage from our home showed him in the kitchen, every motion captured, the careful chopping, the slow stirring, the precise preparation. Nothing was left to chance. Every step meticulously done, yet the most critical detail had eluded him, the intention behind the food. You don't understand, he finally muttered, voice trembling. She was jealous. I leaned forward slightly, my voice low but cutting through the tension like a blade. Jealous? Travante, I didn't touch the food. I didn't tamper with anything. You made this plan, and yet it failed spectacularly. The only life you wanted to harm survived because of me. Do you understand what that means? His hands shook violently, and for a moment I thought he might collapse right there. The officer watching him narrowed his eyes. Sir, your statement contradicts the forensic evidence, the timeline and eyewitness accounts. It's imperative you answer clearly. Did you or did you not intend to harm your wife or her unborn child? Travante froze. His lips twitched, but no words came. His mind raced. He had spent years constructing an image, a life of control and perfection, only to see it crumble in one afternoon. The air in the room thickened with his panic. A storm I had long since learned to navigate with icy calm. You wanted to kill me, I said softly, almost to myself. Or maybe the baby. And yet, here you sit, powerless, because you forgot one thing. I am not afraid. I survived. And now your secrets are exposed. He jerked upright, anger mixing with fear, his face twisted. No! That's impossible. You're lying. Kicha took it herself. That's why. The officer intervened, voice steady and unwavering. Mr. Travante, the evidence is irrefutable. Misoprostol was found uniformly in the stew. The container shows no signs of tampering after preparation. Your story does not match the physical proof. Do you understand that further obstruction will only worsen your position? Travante's facade completely collapsed. His shoulders slumped, his hands dropping to the table, shaking uncontrollably. I watched, almost detached, as the man I had once believed to be a partner, a husband, a protector, revealed himself fully, calculating, cruel, and utterly unprepared for the consequences of his actions. A wave of anger surged within me, but I tempered it with clarity. I had survived his plot. My child had survived, and the moment of reckoning was here. I spoke, voice firm and unwavering. Travante, the only reason anyone lives today is because I acted wisely, because I trusted my instincts. Every lie, every plan you thought was secret, is now in the open. You can no longer manipulate, no longer control. The evidence, the truth, it's all here. And it's stronger than your power or your wealth. He stared at me, eyes wide, seeing not just the woman he had underestimated, but the force of survival and justice that radiated from every line of my body. I realized then that fear was no longer mine to bear. It had shifted entirely onto him. The officer finally closed his folder, looking at him with unyielding authority. Mr. Travante, you will accompany us. The investigation continues at the station. Tampering, obstruction, or deception will be treated with full severity of the law. Travante's jaw trembled, the veneer of control gone, replaced by raw, exposed panic. He had gambled with lives, with trust, with innocence, and now the storm he had sought to orchestrate had consumed him instead. I straightened my posture, resting a hand gently on my belly, feeling the small life within me kick once. Then again, a tiny pulse of resilience amidst the wreckage. For the first time, I felt an unshakable truth. Survival wasn't just about escaping harm, it was about witnessing evil for what it truly was, and knowing you could endure it, rise above it, and protect what mattered most. The man who had once been my world was now nothing but a cautionary tale. And I was ready to reclaim my life. The truth had been revealed, but the storm wasn't over yet. What would happen when justice caught up with Travante, and when I finally confronted the full scope of his betrayal? The hospital waiting room had transformed into a theater of silent reckoning. Every tick of the clock seemed to echo the slow, inevitable collapse of the man who had once called himself my husband. Travante sat slumped in the corner, hands trembling, eyes wide, as if the weight of the entire morning had finally crushed him. His expensive suit was now a tattered mask of the man he had once pretended to be, Controlled, charming, untouchable. The officers returned, folders in hand, their expressions serious. "We have verified everything," the lead officer said, voice calm but cutting. "Cameras, forensic tests, timelines, all confirm the same conclusion. The misoprostol was mixed thoroughly during the preparation of the stew. No tampering occurred afterward. The victim's consumption matches the sequence described by Mrs. Zanaya. The evidence contradicts every claim you have made." Travante's face went pale, lips parting and closing as if searching for words that could reverse the tide. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Then, finally, a low, desperate hiss escaped him. "No, no! This isn't possible! I didn't—" I stood slowly, deliberately, the power of survival grounding my every movement. My hand rested lightly on my belly, feeling the small pulse of life I had fought to protect. I met his gaze directly, no fear, no trembling, only the icy clarity of truth. "Travante," I said, voice calm but piercing, "look at yourself. Look at what you've become. This isn't just failure, this is exposure. You gambled with lives, with innocence, with the child you thought you could control, and it has all crumbled." His hands shook violently now. I saw the fear that money, power, and charm had never been able to touch. The truth had stripped him bare. I didn't intend," he stammered, but the words were hollow, meaningless against the avalanche of evidence that surrounded him. The lead officer took a step forward. "Mr. Travante, we will be taking you into custody. Further attempts to manipulate, threaten, or mislead the investigation will be treated as obstruction of justice. You will have your chance to explain yourself fully, but know this: the evidence cannot be ignored." Travante's eyes flickered toward me one last time, a mix of hatred, desperation, and disbelief. For a moment, I saw the man I had once loved buried beneath layers of calculation and cruelty. And then he was gone, replaced entirely by the terror of a predator exposed. I felt a strange calm wash over me. For the first time since that morning began, I allowed myself to breathe fully. The storm around me, the lies, the betrayal, the near loss, was still raw, but the path forward had become clear. My child was safe. My life was mine to reclaim. And the man who had sought to destroy us would face the consequences of his own actions. A paramedic approached and gave me a small, reassuring nod. Kichia was stable, though her loss was tragic. I swallowed hard, the mix of relief and sorrow pressing on my chest. This was the human cost of deception, of selfishness, of hidden cruelty. But it was also the moment where resilience was born, not from revenge, but from survival, clarity, and the quiet, steadfast protection of life. I sat down in the chair once more, hand gently tracing the small curve of my belly, feeling the life within me that had endured. Every kick, every pulse was a reminder of strength, hope, and the power to rise above betrayal. I knew the road ahead would be difficult, filled with legal battles, emotional scars, and the need to heal. But I also knew one truth that could not be taken from me. I had survived, I had protected, and I would not be broken. Travante, the man who had once been my world, was now a shadow of fear and exposure. And I, carrying new life within me, had become unshakable. The final confrontation was near. Justice would be served, truths fully revealed, and the life I protected would illuminate the path to healing. But what would it cost him, and what would it teach me about trust, love, and resilience? The hospital room felt heavy with silence, a stark contrast to the chaos of the morning. Machines beeped softly, monitors casting a cold glow over sterile walls. Kisia lay in a bed nearby, her face pale and drained, yet stable. The paramedics had assured us she would survive, but the child she carried could not. A deep, hollow ache settled in my chest, not mine, but for the life lost, and the betrayal that had led us here. Travante had been escorted to a holding area, his face ghostly, jaw clenched in disbelief and frustration. The mask of control he had once worn so flawlessly had crumbled completely. Now, he sat alone, surrounded by the consequences of his own making. I felt no triumph, only a clear, icy sense of justice, finally catching up to him. I walked slowly over to Kishia's bedside, sitting down on the chair beside her, careful not to startle her. Her eyes fluttered open, meeting mine with a fragile vulnerability. I'm sorry," she whispered, voice trembling, raw with grief. I didn't know. You didn't do anything wrong, I reassured her gently, squeezing her hand lightly. You survived. That's what matters. That little life, it was never yours to lose in secret. It's okay to grieve. It's okay to feel everything right now. She nodded, tears spilling freely. And I felt a surge of protectiveness, not just for her, but for the life growing within me. My child, safe for now, had given me a renewed purpose. The weight of betrayal, the danger, the fear, it all became a catalyst, not a chain. Meanwhile, Travante sat in the holding area, speaking quietly to the officers. His words were frantic, defensive, desperate. It wasn't like that. You have to investigate further. She must have tampered with it. The officers exchanged a glance, tired but unwavering. Sir, all forensic evidence and footage confirm the timeline and sequence. Your claims are not consistent with physical evidence. This is no longer about accusation. It's about facts. Hearing this, I realized something profound. The man I had loved, trusted, and even feared could no longer control the narrative. The life I protected, the decisions I made in the face of danger, had not only saved me, but exposed his cruelty fully. There was power in surviving, not just physically, but emotionally, morally, and intellectually. As I sat by Kichia's side, my mind wandered back to the early morning. The smell of the stew, my nausea, my quick decision to give it to her. What had seemed like a minor instinctive choice the hospital had finally settled into an uneasy calm. Machines beeped rhythmically, a soft counterpoint to the chaos that had unfolded just hours before. I sat in a cold plastic chair, hands resting protectively on my belly, feeling the tiny, insistent kicks of the life that had endured the morning's horrors. Each movement was a reminder that I had survived, that my instincts had been right, and that even in the face of betrayal, life finds a way to persist. Kicha was stable, though the loss of her child cast a heavy shadow over her delicate features. I had stayed by her side through the worst of the ordeal, offering comfort even as my own heart had raced with fear and anger. Witnessing her grief brought home the fragility of life and the weight of Travante's cruelty, but it also sharpened my resolve. I could not, would not, allow fear or pain to dictate the rest of my life. Travante, meanwhile, had been removed to a secure location. The officers had assured me that he would be questioned thoroughly, his access to manipulation and deceit now completely stripped away. I had no desire for revenge. Justice, when guided by truth, would unfold in its own time. But I also understood the power of witnessing someone confront the consequences of their actions. I leaned back in my chair, eyes wandering over the sterile, bright walls of the waiting room. The fluorescent lights reflected in the polished floors, and I felt an almost cinematic clarity settle over me. Everything that had happened, the fear, the near loss of my child, the betrayal, was now part of a story I would carry. A story that had taught me more about resilience, intuition, and the strength of life than any calm, uneventful day ever could. A nurse entered quietly, carrying a clipboard. Mrs. Zanaya, Kishia Io is stable, and we will continue monitoring her. She is aware and lucid now, though understandably shaken. You should take some time to rest as well. I nodded, offering a small smile, though the exhaustion pressed heavily against my chest. My thoughts, however, refused to rest. I thought back to the morning sunlight filtering through my office windows, to the smell of the stew, to the instinctive decision that had saved my life and the life of my child. That small choice, the simple act of refusing what could have been fatal, had shifted the course of destiny. It was in that quiet reflection that I understood something profound. Survival is not just about endurance. Survival is about awareness, intuition, and the courage to act in alignment with one's own values, even when the world around you is chaotic and dangerous. That morning, I had chosen life over fear, instinct over obedience, and truth over deception. And those choices had saved more than just myself. They had preserved innocence, morality, and the fragile, precious potential of life itself. The hours passed slowly, each tick of the clock bringing me closer to clarity, healing, and a new understanding of my own strength. Travante's absence, once a source of tension, became a symbol of accountability. The man I had trusted blindly was no longer a threat. The child I carried was no longer in danger. And the world, though forever altered by betrayal and near tragedy, had granted me a chance to rise, to heal, and to protect what truly mattered. As I leaned back, letting the quiet envelop me, I realized the irony. The life-threatening chaos of the morning had revealed a truth far more powerful than fear or anger could sudden it ever have shown. I had survived, my child had survived, and I was no longer defined by the manipulations of a man who sought to control and destroy. The storm had passed, Wallstein, but its lessons lingered, shaping a resilience that no betrayal could undo. And I knew in my bones that the best chapters of my life were yet to be written. The final confrontation loomed, the last pieces of truth would be revealed, and justice would meet cruelty face to face. But what I would discover in the end about love, life, and my own strength would surpass every fear I had ever known. The police station was quiet now, almost oppressively so. The weight of the morning's chaos seemed to hang in the air, as if every corner of the building remembered the storm that had passed through. Travante sat in the interrogation room, alone now, his face a mixture of fear, disbelief, and the faint glimmer of understanding, amid that his carefully constructed empire of control had collapsed completely. I walked slowly down the corridor, each step deliberate, every heartbeat echoing in my chest. My child stirred within me, a gentle reminder that life, fragile, precious, and fiercely resilient, still had the power to thrive despite betrayal. I had survived a man who had once called himself my protector. I had outlived his plot, his cruelty, and his deception. And now, the final reckoning was near. The lead officer approached, holding a folder of evidence. Mrs. Zanaya, we are ready to proceed with the final review of the case. All forensic tests, security footage, and witness statements have been consolidated. This is the moment where the truth will leave no room for manipulation or doubt. I nodded, my resolve solid. I had spent the morning watching Travante unravel, listening to his desperate justifications, and observing the hollow arrogance fade from his eyes. But this was more than a legal process. This was a confrontation with the full scope of his betrayal, a moment to witness the consequences of cruelty firsthand. The interrogation room door opened and Travante was brought forward. His posture was rigid, but the mask of confidence was gone. His eyes flickered toward me, a mixture of panic and the first hints of genuine fear. Travante, I began, voice steady, deliberate. Look at what has come of your actions. You planned, you plotted, you sought to manipulate life itself. And yet, here you sit, powerless. Your control, your charm, your arrogance, all illusions. The chance I carry, the life that now moves within me, survived because I acted, because I trusted my instincts, because I refused to allow your cruelty to dictate fate. He swallowed hard, trembling. Zanaya, No, I interrupted sharply. Ich weiß was comb. But a cutting? You do not get to speak of intention, only consequence. You gambled with life, and your reckoning is upon you. The evidence leaves no room for excuses. Every step of your deceit, every lie, every act of manipulation has been documented and verified. There is no escape. The lead officer stepped forward, closing the folder with finality. Mr. Travante, your actions endangered 2 lives. The evidence proves attempted poisoning with intent to harm. You will face criminal charges, and your control over the situation is over. Justice will proceed according to the law. Travante's shoulders slumped, eyes darting toward me one last time, seeking an answer, seeking mercy, perhaps even seeking understanding. But I had none to give. My power was no longer dependent on fear or control. It was in truth, in survival, in resilience, and in the life I carried. I placed a hand gently on my belly, feeling the quiet strength of the small life within me. This child, I thought, is my shield, my anchor, my proof that life can endure even the darkest intent. Travante, once my world, was now a shadow of the man he had pretended to be. His empire of deception had crumbled, leaving only accountability and truth. As the officers led him away, I realized something profound. The storm of betrayal, fear, and near loss had forged a new clarity within me. I was no longer just a survivor. I was a witness, a protector, and a woman unshakable in her moral and emotional strength. I had faced cruelty, exposed it, and emerged with my dignity, my child, and my future intact. The man who had sought to destroy me would face justice. The life I protected would continue. And I, stronger and wiser, would rise beyond the shadows of betrayal, armed with clarity, courage, and the unbreakable bond of life itself. The storm had passed, but the lessons remained. The man who tried to control fate was now powerless, and I was free, not just to survive, but to reclaim life, love, and hope. But the final chapter, the ultimate resolution, would leave no question. Strength and resilience always prevail. The first rays of sunlight spilled through this hospital windows, soft and warm, painting the sterile white walls with a quiet promise. It was almost surreal. After the chaos, the fear, and the near tragedy, the world seemed to pause for a moment, holding its breath. I sat in the waiting room, hands resting protectively on my belly, feeling the steady, reassuring movements of my child. Every kick was a pulse of life, a reminder that resilience had survived cruelty. Travante's fate had been sealed. The investigation, backed by irrefutable evidence, had stripped him of his power and exposed the darkness behind his charm. He had been charged with attempted poisoning and manipulation, and every lie he had woven to control the narrative had collapsed under the weight of truth. Watching him escorted away for the last time, I felt no satisfaction, only clarity. Justice had been served, not in vengeance, but in consequence. Kitja had been stabilized, her grief raw, but manageable. I had stayed by her side through the ordeal, sharing quiet words of comfort, realizing that strength is often about supporting others, even when your own heart is heavy. Together, we had survived something unimaginable. And in our survival, there was a lesson. Life persists, even in the darkest moments, and courage comes from the smallest, most instinctive choices. I leaned back in the chair, closing my eyes for a moment. The memory of that morning flooded back. The smell of the stew, the nausea that had guided my instinct, the quick decision to hand it to Kisia instead of consuming it myself. That small, seemingly insignificant choice had changed the course of our lives. It had preserved innocence, protected life, and revealed the true face of a man I had once loved and trusted blindly. The hospital slowly came to life around me. Nurses moving with practiced efficiency, doctors discussing routines, the soft hum of monitors, and the occasional laughter of a child. In the pediatric wing, amid this ordinary rhythm, I felt extraordinary gratitude. I had faced betrayal, near loss, and the chilling reality of human cruelty. And yet I was here, alive, carrying life within me, unbroken. I placed my hand on my belly again, feeling the life that had weathered the storm. I whispered softly, more to myself than anyone else, "We survived. You survived. And we will thrive." A small kick responded, as if affirming the promise of tomorrow, the strength that had been tested and had endured. In that quiet moment, I understood something profound. Resilience is not the absence of fear, betrayal, or tragedy. It is the courage to act in the face of them, to protect what matters, to trust intuition, and to embrace life even when it trembles on the edge of destruction. True strength is not about control or revenge. It is about survival, compassion, and the unwavering resolve to rise above cruelty. Travante had tried to destroy us. He had gambled with life and innocence, but his attempt had revealed not weakness, but the opposite. The strength I never knew I possessed is the clarity of a moral compass unshaken by fear, and the power of choice in the most crucial moments. As I left the hospital that afternoon, the sunlight felt warmer, the air lighter. The world, though scarred by what had happened, had granted me a second chance. I walked slowly, deliberately, feeling the life inside me, and the unshakable certainty that no betrayal, no cruelty, no act of malice could ever take from me what truly mattered: hope, courage, and life itself. The man who once sought to destroy us was gone. The life he could not harm thrived within me. And I, standing in the sunlight of survival, realized that the greatest power is not in controlling others, but in protecting life, embracing resilience, and rising unbroken from the storm. And in that moment, I understood. Even in the face of betrayal and darkness, life endures. And so do we, unbreakable and unstoppable. Did you enjoy the story? I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'm curious, what city are you watching from? Thank you so much for your kind support. On the screen, you'll find two more incredible life stories that I highly recommend. You won't want to miss them. There's so much more waiting for you on my channel, so don't forget to subscribe. I can't wait to share the next life story with you. With love and respect, see you soon!